Hello and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Allison Tiemann, and I will be your host for this advertisement for the HBR Talk, and I'm also the creator of Honey Badger Radio. So with me today is Hannah Wallen, who is the host of our Thursday show, HBR Talk, and she has a very special topic that she's going to be covering this Thursday. So Hannah, tell us what topic you chose and why you chose it.
This week I want to talk about equity. It's something that we've been hearing about all the time now from politicians, identity politics ideologues. My title actually this week is Equity, Identitarians, Newsweek Shield or Newspeak Shield for Discrimination. And it sort of takes me back to early in the anti-feminist end of men's rights discussion, where you have to deal with the fact that a lot of men's issues exist around legislation that has been argued for by feminists that discriminates against men and boys for women's purported benefit. And they make this argument that men have all the resources and women only want some of the resources, and it's whiny if you complain that resources are being taken away from men to achieve that. Except they don't factor in how the resources are acquired. And, so you're taking resources away from somebody who worked for them, or they're treating human rights as a limited resource, and therefore you can't have men's rights if you also have women's rights. And so they're really engaging in a type of con artistry, really. There's not a way to sugarcoat that. And so that's what the discussion is going to be about. And, of course, I asked you to join in this week because of your, that I remember your old video. It's old now. I looked it up. I think it was like 20... 13. I want to say 2013, yeah. Right before...
if I have the right video.
Yeah,
if I know which video this is.
Who's the ice cream maker? Yeah,
who's
the ice cream
who's
maker?
The ice cream maker. Mm.
And I thought, well, this is perfect. This is exactly the questions that I want to see asked. And so that's basically the discussion that we're going to have. How can they have this discussion without considering these factors?
Exactly. And this calls to mind some exchanges that I've had with feminists and some thoughts that I've had recently on this very topic. The first one is that when feminists tell us things like, well, why don't you create your own women or men's shelter? We created our women's shelter. The truth of the matter is that feminists and women did not create women's shelters. What they did was they identified a need that women had and appealed to a mostly male financiers and government officials to give them the money and resources to do it. And the reason why it worked for them is because, to be quite frank, that is how society is set up. It's set up to take resources from men and give resources to women. And that's obvious when you think about the fact that society doesn't exist in the future unless it gets women the resources they need to reproduce.
In the present.
Yeah, in the present. So it's such a ubiquitous fact about society. In fact, society that is a society, really. The act of encouraging or creating excess productivity from men to give to women, and to ensure that women are provided with the necessary safety and material to produce the next generation. And the fact is that what feminists did was simply identify new needs that women had, and the mostly male leaders of society created the resources and the financial means for them to fulfill those newly identified needs. Of course, our situation in the men's issues community is quite a bit different because we're advocating for something that society is actually really sort of against, and that is taking resources and directing them towards men, which, it doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense why society is dead set against it, because men do the heavy lifting to keep our society operating. Might not have been the case, generations upon generations ago when a lot of the industry was in the home, but now it definitely is the case that they're doing the majority of the sewer work, the majority of the utility work, the majority of the work that's difficult, painful, or uncomfortable to keep society running. Therefore, maybe taking care of them a little bit would be to our benefit. But, we still seem to be working uphill on these issues, so I always find it funny when feminists say, well, why don't you just make the resources for yourself like we did? Well, you didn't. And
No.
you actually exploited something that you insist doesn't exist. And in fact, if it didn't exist, what you did wouldn't have worked. And I had this conversation actually behind the scenes with Rose Rist. I was talking about, I told him that I wanted to, instead of talking about the problems that we had identified, I said I wanted to talk about what he thought the solutions were to the problems that he talks about. And he came back with this idea that, well, he's not really that concerned about talking about solutions because he thinks that just identifying the problems is sufficient. And I responded and I said, wow, that's a lot of privilege. Because that's not our experience as men's issues advocates. That's not our experience at all. Just identifying the problem doesn't get us anywhere because nobody cares. And that's because we don't have the benefit of society-wide sort of, well, the fact that societies exist in order to get women the resources and the safety they need to have children. And if a society doesn't do that, obviously that society is selected against throughout human history. It seems pretty obvious to me. I know this seems to be really surprising to some people, but it's to bring it back to this topic, which is the equity topic, and that equal is not equal. Was it? Can we just repeat the topic again? I apologize.
So the title would be Equity, Identitarians' Newspeak Shield for Discrimination.
Yes.
So in other words, it's basically about how identitarians use the equity narrative to bypass the equality narrative, the old equality narrative, because equality actually isn't good for identitarians. It would be good in a lot of ways for both men and women, but it's not good for people who base their grift on identity grievances.
Yeah. And I went off on a tangent on how difficult it is to bring about equality on the men's issues side of the aisle.
But you're right.
Yeah, I know I'm right. But I think I took the topic and I just sort of expanded it quite a bit, maybe a little bit beyond. But
well,
I think
what you're talking about definitely makes the female identity grift more profitable.
Well, it always does, really. Because they are exploiting what they say doesn't exist, which is the bias of a society towards making sure that women are protected and provided for obvious reasons. If a society doesn't do that, it ceases to exist.
Right.
And throughout history,
unbreeds itself out of existence.
And throughout history, those societies that were not as good at providing safety and resources to women were selected against. And instead, feminism promotes this idea that society is constructed for the benefit of men at the expense of women. And of course they do that, and it works. It hits everybody's buttons because it's like convincing a congregation of fundamentalist Christians that Satan is under every rock. You can get them running hither and yon and giving you plenty of money to do all kinds of rock exorcisms, and that's basically what feminism does. It knows exactly. I think most feminists know exactly how society works. They know that society is geared towards taking resources from men, giving them to women so that they have the safety and provision in order to create the next generation. And we have instincts around these, and it just keeps hitting that button and lying about the fact that the button exists so that you can keep hitting it some more. So that would definitely tie into the idea that the true equality doctrine, or the true equality, like creating true equality, is an anathema to identitarians when it comes to talking about societies. They don't want that. They want to create inequality in favor of their particular groups. And like I said, there's other stuff that I've talked about on Twitter recently. We can go into it. Just throws this into sharp relief. It was about this new initiative, not new, but recycled initiative to get women to sign up for selective service. and a feminist on Twitter said, well, we should first make everything else equal for women. So we should tolerate an inequality that favors women and has serious harm for men. In fact, in my opinion, the fact that only men are expected to serve their societies in wartime pretty much erases every other benefit they get, because it literally does erase every other benefit they have, including their lives. Because there are other inequalities that she can identify, we should tolerate this one. And I'm like, well, does it work the other way? Because there are supposedly inequalities because there are obvious inequalities that men face, we should ignore the supposed inequalities that you think women face? No response. As usual.
Of course not. She's not going to answer that, because, feminists do not like to talk about the inequalities that men face. They don't like to talk in particular about the reproductive inequalities that men face. They don't like recognizing that it is unfair that women's reproductive choice comes at men's expense, and men's lack of reproductive choice also comes at men's expense. So, they're not going to want to have that discussion at all.
Nope. But if you want to have that discussion, or you want to listen to us having that discussion, then direct your mouse pointer to the low bar, where there will be a link to the show. Just a point of clarification, are we just setting up the show just before it airs now, or do we have a link beforehand now?
Yeah, we're just setting up the show just before it airs now, so there's no way to produce a link prior to the show, unfortunately.
Okay. All right, so the link will be in the low bar. Okay. Thank you for your kind attention. Of course, I fumble over the word attention. Thank you for your kind attention, and have a lovely day.